When most UFOs are spotted, logical conclusions blame military aircraft for the incident, and discussions immediately turn to the Air Force covering up a test run of their new fancy pants fighter jets. But when it's the Air Force themselves who witness such events, they know for sure that the strange, unidentified craft they're looking at definitely isn't one of their own. One such incident happened on July 24th, 1948, and involved two World War II Air Force veterans, Clarence Childs and Charles Whitted, who reported that a long, rocket-like aircraft with two separate window decks flew alongside their Eastern Airlines passenger plane for at least 15 seconds, allowing both men to get a solid look at it. This object had also been seen by Walter Massey, a member of the ground crew at a local Air Force base an hour beforehand, and a similar-looking craft was also reported as appearing in the Netherlands a month earlier. Amazingly, an Air Force investigation concluded that it was a genuine alien spacecraft, an assessment later downgraded to meteor after their superiors handed the report right back to them, presumably along with a demotion. But Childs and Whitted were adamant that this was no meteor, and to this day, the strange object, which stalked a passenger jet, has yet to be identified. Number 6. Great balls of fire. Another common explanation for many UFO sightings is a mistakenly identified incoming meteor. But when the famous green fireball sightings of New Mexico were analyzed by an expert, he concluded otherwise. The green fireballs were witnessed by hundreds of military personnel, amateur astronomers, and government scientists between 1948 and 1955. And meteor expert Dr. Lincoln La Paz claimed their slow speed and lack of trails ruled out the meteor explanation. The US Air Force was anxious to find out the cause of these fireballs because they were occurring directly above a military installation where H-bombs were being secretly produced, but their official investigation into the phenomena, the ridiculously named Project Twinkle, resulted in precisely zero conclusions. Dr. La Paz speculated the fireballs were Russian aircraft or undocumented natural phenomenon caused by nuclear fallout. But since these fireballs have also been seen in Alberta, Canada, Brisbane, Australia, and Manchester, England, none of these explanations really stack up. Number 5. Truman's true story. In 1952, a number of UFO sightings were reported by many witnesses over Washington, D.C., and not only did members of the public and the Air Force take notice, but President Harry Truman also became involved in the investigation. The first report came on July 19th when air traffic control at Washington National Airport noticed several unidentified flying objects on the radar. Now, these guys, being air traffic controllers, are pretty good at identifying the movements of aircraft, but these objects moved like no aircraft they'd ever seen. A nearby Air Force base also detected the craft, but they disappeared before any planes could be scrambled. However, what's shocking is that the same exact thing happened again 1 week later. The same airports detected the same objects, and this time the fighter jets were ready to intercept. One jet saw nothing, but the other spotted 4 orbs of light screaming around in the sky before again disappearing. President Truman launched Project Blue Book to investigate mysterious happenings like this, and the investigation concluded false radar readings were to blame. But can false radar readings cause hundreds of people on the ground to hallucinate? Methinks not. Number 4. Iranian lights. Did you think it was just drunk-ass Americans who claimed to encounter UFOs? Not so. Because in 1976, over the skies of Tehran, Iran's capital, several Iranian pilots flying F-4 Phantom jets encountered a mysterious blue and red cylindrical object which had disabled their aircraft's navigation and communication systems. The aircraft had been scrambled after the object was spotted by radar entering restricted airspace, and the Iranians weren't in the mood for messing around, so after seeing attempts at communication shut off, the pilots decided to engage the craft aggressively. But as the Iranians prepared to fire upon the UFO, their weapon systems were suddenly shut down. This incident was seen on the ground by multiple witnesses, including generals, radar operators, and ground crews. And it was also documented thoroughly by members of the US military. So with neither side claiming responsibility for the aircraft, we may never find out exactly what caused the 1976 Terrain UFO incident. Number 3. The French Fried Farmer. Trans-in-Provence, southeastern France, January 8, 1981. 55-year-old farmer Renaud Nicolai hears a weird whistling noise whilst he's working. He turns around to see an 8-foot-wide metallic double-stacked saucer land on his property and then shoot off into the sky again. Was Mr. Nicolai on his 4th bottle of wine by this time? Perhaps. He is French after all. But in this eerie UFO incident, there's one kind of credibility which no other entry on this list has: evidence. Burn marks were left on the grounds of Mr. Nicolai's property, and if you're thinking he made them himself, then think again. Scientific analysis showed that a pressure of 4 to 5 tons combined with 300 to 600 degrees Celsius heat caused these burn marks, and a drunk French farmer is hardly capable of faking something like that. Traces of phosphate and zinc were found in the soil samples taken, and an experimental aircraft from nearby Canger's military base was given as the most plausible explanation. But a subsequent 2-year investigation by the French gendarmerie made no solid conclusions whatsoever. Number 2. The Canadian Roswell. On October 4th, 1967, at least 11 people saw a dimly lit craft smash into the waters of Nova Scotia's Shag Harbor and float on the surface briefly, sinking before anyone could reach it. But after a thorough investigation which included local fishing boats, rescue coordinators, and the Canadian military, no traces of a craft were found either on the water or at the bottom of Shag Harbor. No bodies, no wreckage, nothing. And what's stranger is that not a single aircraft or boat, either commercial, private, or military, was reported as missing all across the entire eastern seaboard. Was it a giant moose catapulted into the water? Who knows, because nearly 50 years later, no wreckage has ever been recovered from the site. But in 1967, something definitely crashed into the waters of Shag Harbor, and what it was remains a mystery. Number 1. The ship that shocked a state. A UFO sighting is a lot like an orgy. To have credibility, it usually needs more than one person involved. 2 would be nice, 5 would be great, and 10 would be spectacular. But in March 1997, possibly one of the most credible UFO sightings ever occurred in Nevada and Arizona, and it was witnessed by thousands. The whole event lasted several hours and first kicked off on March 13th when a black V-shaped object covered in lights was seen in the skies above Henderson, Nevada. The witness described it as having the size of a Boeing 747 and traveling with the sound of a rushing wind. The next sighting was from a police officer in Arizona an hour later, and as we all know, police officers never lie. This was followed by reports of a similar object seen in Prescott, Prescott Valley, Dewey, Phoenix, and Tucson, with hundreds of calls made to the local authorities as the object slowly moved from north to south. This is a computer-generated image drawn from the witness account of Tim Lay, which appeared in USA Today, and whilst no explanation has yet been given for the object from official sources, many prominent scientists and officials have referred to the incident in official remarks. Former UK Ministry of Defense official Nick Pope said, quote, "The Phoenix Lights case is one of the most significant waves of UFO sightings ever to have occurred." Unquote. The Arizona governor at the time, Fife Symington III, also witnessed the event, stating it was, quote, "a massive delta-shaped craft," unquote. And based on his prior experience in the US Air Force, he said it, quote, "did not resemble any man-made object I'd ever seen," unquote. So what do you think the objects were in this list? Alien craft? Experimental jets? Eagles covered in tinfoil? Who knows? But if you want to hear about more unexplained observances in the sky, why not take a look at our recent video on the 7 strangest sights and sounds in the sky? If enough people watch it, maybe we'll do a video about unexplained smells too.